Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Donoghue. I'm from the New York Institute of Technology, which is not too far from here. I want to thank Wayne and Taylor for asking me to be here today. A little bit of a fish out of water in a scene like this. I am an exercise physiologist, nutritionist. I do marathons, I do Ironmans. I do exercise for a living, and I research exercise sports. Like on our college campus, I do the football team, I do lacrosse team. So when I was asked 2 years ago to investigate esports, I had no idea what esports even was. I was the person that was Googling it when they were asking me to do it. And I started to investigate it a little bit more, and I realized a lot of misconceptions that are out there amongst people who aren't gamers. You guys are all gamers, so a lot of what I'm going to say comes naturally to you guys, but understand to most of the outside world who don't play video games, they have no idea what you guys do. So I'm going to start with this because this is headlines from the last few years. Actually, the top one just came out November 5th. And this is the negative tone that the sport is taking in headline news. And it puts a really dark side on your industry. These are all true, but today what I really want to get through is there's a lot of fake news out there. I call it fake news because that's the big hype in the country right now with Trump is fake news. But scientific evidence, why you need it in this industry, where we are with it, how much we're lacking in it. The stereotypes in the sport that are probably inhibiting larger organizations from giving you guys the attention that you deserve. And then from a health perspective, what direction we should go in, because I come from more of a collegiate level. I look at college and high school. Today we heard from a lot of pro teams, and I've learned so much today from the pro teams. It was actually amazing that hopefully we could take what they're doing and we can bring it down to a lower level, because remember, the collegiate level and the high school level are a lot more people, and the more people you get involved, the more people we get educated, the bigger your sport's going to become. I did a radio interview 2 days ago, and it was on Dr. Radio, on XM Radio, and I was supposed to talk about the health of esport players, and it ended up more being 15 minutes on just almost defending what an esport player is. And these were the questions that they asked me. And these were doctors who were asking it. Is it a sport? Are they athletes? But they're playing video games, and that's what I'm constantly defending. Are they athletes? I don't understand. They're playing video games. What kind of injuries are they getting? And what I answered to them is, shame on them as physicians for even asking that. I'm not here to debate if it's a sport. I'm not here to debate if you're an athlete or not. There's medical concerns in this population, and as medical professionals, it's our responsibility to treat them and to prevent them. So I'll let everybody else duke it out between sport, athlete, and all that, but from the health perspective, it's irrelevant. If you go on Pubmed, and if some of you might not know what Pubmed is, it's actually a search engine for scientists to look to see what valid research has been done in the field. If you go on Pubmed and you type in esports, you find 26 articles. Now, in the world of science, that's nothing. And 0 clinical trials. A clinical trial is where you take a population and you actually do an intervention on them and you see if it helps them. So it's studies that are on human subjects. There's 0 on human subjects, except there's a couple on gaming addiction, 2 opinion pieces. I found 2 prospective studies, and then there's 2 on how to medically treat, and I wrote those, so I knew they were in there. So we're really starting at ground zero for research. From a college level, why do we need research? Why do you even care as esport players? These 2 organizations oversee a college level, okay? This past April, the NCAA rejected esports as a sport. And it was actually a big blow to the medical community when this happened. Not so much the players. I mean, players don't know that it was a big blow to them because they're 19 years old. But, and this was their reason, that research is going to play a key role, that there was lack of leadership, lack of structure. And really, again, the key thing was research. The NCAA doesn't understand. What they base their rules on is research. So what we know, I'm going to actually flip forward to this is what the NCAA has for football, okay? And they have hundreds of guidelines for football. I'm giving you 4. But they're not allowed to have 2-a-day practices. They're not allowed to have pads on more than right after a game. They have very strict guidelines about contact sports. And the reason they have this is because it was years and years of players getting their heads crushed and getting concussions. And now we know better from research how to minimize that in our players. So the NCAA doesn't know what to do with esport players because they have nothing to base it on. So I'm going to go back. At the Asian Games, it was featured as a demonstration sport. It was officially announced as a medal sport in the Asian Games of 2022, and they just retracted it. They retracted it for the same reason that the NCAA retracted it, because there's not one single federation, there's not enough governing body overseeing these athletes. So they pulled it away. In Tokyo this summer, you will see it before the Olympic Games. Again, it's not a medal sport, but Intel is doing a tournament before the Olympics. But again, in the next Olympics in 2024, it still hasn't been sanctioned as a medal sport. The French want it there because they want to bring the younger generation in, but because of the lack of structure and the lack of research, it's still not going to be a medal sport. And these were some of the quotes that they gave, that some of the games are not compatible with Olympic values, meaning the guns and the shooting. But on a good note, what I put down here was curling. Anybody know what curling is in the Olympics? Okay, yeah, so everybody gives that little chuckle what curling is. Curling went through almost what esports is going to go through. Curling took a long time to get sanctioned by the Olympics, but they finally did because they started doing the research. It started back in 1920 to get curling in the Olympics, and they finally, I believe it was in the 80s or the 70s that they finally made a medal sport. So it will happen with esports, it's just going to take some time. So why do we care if NCAA cares? Well, what I care about from a health perspective is every athlete in the NCAA has to be seen by a physician. They have to be medically cleared. They have guidelines on how much they can practice. We can oversee them and make sure that the coaches aren't pushing them too much. Coaches have to report how many hours they practice for every team to the athletic director. They keep very strict guidelines on that. And the reason they do that, again, it's for the health of the player. That's our concern, is the health of the players. Another thing is, our esports team on our campus can't practice together this year because they're not allowed to change their schedules the way NCAA players are allowed to change their schedules. NCAA players get first choice of what classes they want to take. That's not true for our esports team, so now they are forced to practice at 11 o'clock at night, not from our arena, but from home. So that, again, that was another big blow from the NCAA. So from a medical standpoint, we were really disappointed in this, because how else do you get a player in for health treatment? And a 19-year-old is not going to go for health, or they're not going to actually see a physician because they want to play. Like any other athlete, they want to play. They don't want to be sidelined. So these are big questions. How much is too much? How much do we regulate their hours of play? And I was speaking to some of the pros before, and they're at this level where they're making guidelines. We are not even close to this level at the college level or high school level. And you have to maintain a certain GPA in school as well. So some of this research out there, and some of it's going to be positive, some of it's going to be negative. And I'm not saying this at all to be negative. I just want to clarify the science behind some of it. That they found that this is a very mentally challenging and stressful activity, and it is. However, there was a study done that said science shows that esports professionals are real athletes. What they used was heart rate, cortisol levels, and stress levels. Another article said that it shows they're real athletes because their heart rate went up as high as 150, 160 beats per minute, the same as a marathon runner. It also stated that their cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone, goes as high as a race car driver. Therefore, it's a real sport. Yes, their heart rate's going up. Yes, their cortisol, that's stress to the body. It's not physical activity. So you can convince me with all this that it's stressful, that it's physically, it's draining on your mind, but it's not physical activity, okay? It's the opposite of physical activity. And that is something that is the argument between these health professions like the American College of Sports Medicine and what's going on in your field. You cannot monitor stress just by heart rate. In our field, we use something called oxygen consumption, where we look at what you're breathing, okay? And here's the difference physiologically between it. So when you have stress, if you go to a horror movie, or if you're being chased by a dog, your heart rate goes up, you're scared. That's the same kind of stress. That's a stress to the body. That's catecholamines. That's hormones being released in your body. That's stressing your body out. When your heart rate goes up by using physical activity, it's to bring blood to your working muscles, blood to your brain. It works your heart. It's a completely different physiological response. So to compare it to physical activity and the sense of exercise is just, it's physiologically wrong. And it's giving these articles that are saying that are actually doing more harm to your industry than good. So when I first found out about this, I said, okay, there's nothing, we know nothing. We know nothing about these players. We don't know what they complain about. We don't know anything. So we did a giant study across the country. We asked all these universities and these players what their injuries were, what their playing time, like what are these lifestyle habits? And here's what we found. We found that they play 8 to 10 hours a day sometimes with no breaks, very minimal breaks. Some go 5 hours without a break, which shocked us. 15% said they went 3 hours or more without a break. And for those who aren't familiar with deep vein thrombosis, the blood clots in your legs, the recommendation is really never to go more than 3 or 4 hours, even on an airplane, without movement, because you can form blood clots in your legs. 40% didn't do any physical activity at all, and only 2% sought any medical attention for any ailments that they had. So our most common complaint, it actually didn't come up on my slide, but that's fine, actually was vision. And I didn't hear any of the pros mention that today. I've heard neck, I heard wrists and all that, but the number one complaint that we had was vision, which is something called digital eye strain. And it's a cumulative effect of being in front of the blue screen too much. And a lot of times when we asked the players about it, it just came with the territory. They didn't realize it was actually a medical concern. It does cause blurred vision. They do get neck and back pain. It can cause migraines, and it can actually affect sleep. And when I asked a lot of the questions of what they did, they said, well, you just kind of look off into the distance and let your eyes refocus, and then we look back at the screen. But what they don't know is that it really will never get better if you don't give it enough rest along the way. There it is. So this was the highest one. Over 50% said they had eye fatigue. Here's the numbers that we found on here, that 30% had hand pain, neck and back pain was 41%, and wrist pain. Now, I'm not shocking you with these because you all know that this comes with this. The problem is there was nothing that was documenting it. We have to show it with research. For any institution to look at it and say, okay, this is a genuine problem, maybe we need to fund this, maybe we need to look more into this. So these were the numbers that we found with that study. You guys might know some of these players. I didn't realize that the actual retirement age of a pro esport player is less than an NFL player. 26 years old is the average retirement age. And a lot of these are because of wrist injuries, a lot because of preventative medicine that they did not have. Obviously, on the pro level we heard today, they're taking huge strides in preventing this. It's not happening at a college level yet. And the reason is also money. The NFL loses $300 million a year on injury. So these companies and these teams that have these athletes and these colleges who are offering scholarships now, colleges are offering scholarships, they have an invested interest in this. So you're giving money away, but if your player gets injured, you're losing money just like any other sport. So they have an invested interest to actually create a health system for these players. So another study we did, you look up here, we used a Fitbit Watch to look at activity. And what you see there is a DEXA scan machine. So it's almost like what you go on to get your bone mineral density test, but we do something called body composition testing in our athletes. And why do we care about body composition? So if you look at the chart up here, the women on top all weigh 135 pounds, the men on the bottom are 185 pounds. But you can see that clearly they look different. So when you go to a doctor, the first thing they do is they put you on a scale, and then they say what your weight is, and they'll give you something called a body mass index, which uses your height and your weight to tell you if you're overweight or if you're obese. The International Olympic Committee does not use that with athletes because they have so much muscle mass, it's inaccurate. It makes them heavier and it puts them in obese. So it's not an accurate tool with athletes. We did it with our esport players, and what we found is exactly the same, but we found reverse. So again, these two people weigh exactly the same. Obviously, Arnold here has got muscles. He's not clearly the same. One has more muscle, one has more body fat. But if they were to step on a scale, it's telling a very different story than when we look at their body composition. For the scientists in the room, I put numbers up. I know I hate putting charts up. It bores people to death. But if you look at step count, so we already know that they're probably less active. But again, we had to document this. We found that they walked 53% less than age-matched students on the same campus who were not competitive esport players. 6,000 steps versus almost 12,843 steps. You can see the other numbers on there. Sleep, we actually did not find a big difference in sleep, which I was surprised at. Days per week exercise, if you look at the bottom here, 1.7 versus 4.8, that was significant, so the amount of times. And recreational use was actually a lot different as well in esport players on the computer than non-esport players. And this carries over. So when you have body composition changes, one thing leads to another. So there's something called visceral fat on your body, which can only be tested by the machine that we use. Visceral fat's the fat that's on your inner organs. So you can look thin, but if you have a high visceral fat, you're at much higher risk for heart disease, for diabetes, for stroke. And low muscle mass can actually lead to something called low bone mineral content. Okay, so you're also looking at significant differences in bone mineral content, which these are 19-year-old kids. At this stage, if there's this low, you're making them really prone to osteoporosis, probably at a very young age. So body composition, we're looking here. So I want you to notice the BMI in the corner here. Our esport players had a BMI of 23.7. Our non-esport players, 24.9. They actually had a lower body mass index, which relatively speaking, they're the same. But if you look, their number was lower than a non-esport player. So if you walk into a physician's office and they just look at that, they're going to say, you're fine, you're healthy, you're great. Their body fat, however, their body fat was 24% versus 19%. What really shocked us was their lean body mass. That's your muscle. That's your muscle tone. And I heard before someone say how their players are losing, they're getting numbness in their shoulders and arms. If you don't have the muscle structure to support what you're doing, you're going to have overuse injuries. And what we found was a significant difference in lean body mass. As a matter of fact, they were in the 10th percentile for lean body mass, whereas the non-esport players were about 35 percentile. So this was a shock, and this makes sense when we see low bone mineral content. So you're looking at a generation of kids that are playing already at a disadvantage at 19 years old of low muscle mass, and when you get older, it's called something called sarcopenia. It's called muscle wasting, and what they find with this is it's rather than high body fat, we could even just ignore body fat right now and just look at lean body mass. What they're finding is all these health risks with low muscle mass. Increased risk of musculoskeletal injuries is a big one. So a lot of these players might be getting all these injuries that could be prevented if they just did some simple exercise. We're not asking them to run marathons or go out and become weightlifters. We're just asking for basic movement. And a big thing that can maybe convince them that exercise might be more important is decreased focus. That's been shown with research with low muscle mass, that you actually have decreased focus. These are the recommended guidelines for exercise, and this is something that's fairly new, this concept that came out. So minimum, they want you to exercise 3 days a week. Numbers, I hate guidelines because like nobody reads them, nobody pays attention to them, but they're there for a reason because they have to put them out to show what's necessary to maintain health. There's something called exercise deficit disorder, which fit the category of most of our esport players, which is they just don't exercise enough. But let's take that away. Let's take a player who does exercise enough. Let's take a player who exercises every morning for 60 minutes. What they show now is that might not be enough to undo the effects of prolonged sitting. So that's another whole problem, and I'm going to shout it out because this is, to me, one of the problems with probably esports today is not so much, okay, let's get them exercising. It's the prolonged sitting without a break. What they're showing is that 60 to 75 minutes is enough to probably negate prolonged sitting. That's a lot of exercise for anybody to do on a daily basis, 60. Some people do it, but majority of people won't do it. So what we need to focus on is the breaks, getting up and moving, and it doesn't take a lot. They actually show if you can get up and just move around for under 10 minutes, it's enough. Another thing that we looked at is something called our natural circadian rhythm. So we have something called melatonin and cortisol. Our melatonin goes up at night to make us tired. It's our sleep hormone. Because these players are in front of a blue light screen, their circadian rhythm is a little bit out of whack. We found that their melatonin levels were completely reversed, that they were actually higher in the morning than at night, and that the cortisol levels were inversely related to that. And it did affect their sleep. And again, we asked them why, and one thing is that you can play your sport internationally. So sometimes you're playing someone in another country that might be up at a different hour. And that was the #1 reason why they said that. Or they just become addicted to gaming, a lot of them, and they just want to play through the night. So we did find changes in their hormones. And why is sleep so important? And I know someone's going to go into this. So lack of sleep is equivalent to 0.05 blood alcohol levels. Did you know that in the Olympics, they bring sleep coaches with them? So these athletes, Serena Williams, she's not an Olympic athlete, but she has a sleep coach. They bring sleep coaches. They actually make the rooms for the Olympic athletes a certain ambiance so that they get enough sleep. Sleep is the best secret weapon to any professional athlete. I've worked with a lot of professional athletes. They've all said the same thing. Sleep and rest is the best secret weapon. And 6 to 8 hours is considered optimal. Honestly, our esport players were not getting that, but neither were the counterparts. But for an athlete who wants to perform, it's something to consider. Another study we did was postural changes. We looked at a gaming chair, much like the ones you have over here, versus regular chairs to see if does it make a difference in their postural support. If you look closely at his posture, that's 1 hour. Let me see if I can, there's my line, there it is. So if you look at the line, 1 hour of sitting, you can see the changes in his posture, and that's just 1 hour, okay? Now picture after 3 hours what happens to your posture. And this did not really change much using a gaming chair. So we did not find any difference between using a regular chair or a gaming chair, but we did find major postural changes over the course of just an hour. And this is a model that we published. We actually use this model on our campus. But the reason we're able to use it on campus is because we have a great relationship with the coach of the team. They don't have to follow this. They don't have to come see us because they're not under any guidelines to see us. The athletic director can mandate it. But when you don't have a governing body overseeing every school and our school starts implementing rules that other teams aren't, well, now maybe we're playing at a disadvantage because we're not getting as much practice as the other team, which is why you need that universal body. And this has worked great for us. You know, if someone needs an occupational therapist, we send them to them. We just do a basic overview. Okay, you're having some eye problems, let's fix. Where's your chair sitting? Where is your screen? It's a great model. The problem is we can't implement this now because the NCAA has not sanctioned us, so there's no reason for anybody to ever see a medical professional to oversee them. So really, these are the current questions that we really need to, that we were asking. My school's actually working on osteopathic manipulation, which is a form of medicine that uses manual therapy. And can physical training improve health and reduce injury in competitive esport players? These are basic research studies that we need to get out there in order for these larger organizations like the Olympics and all these other committees to actually take a look at your sport and say, hey, maybe we need to look more into this, maybe we need to fund this. Funding is a big, big problem in this area. When Wayne spoke before about why he got rejected, immediately what went to my head is, well, if he put something in there that said it's going to improve health, and now you've got a generation of parents who have kids who play video games who are trying to make them healthy. Now you've got science and you've got the health professionals on your side, the general public. And NIH is not going to fund this right now because of the lack of research. What we need is these other companies. From what I look into this sport, you guys have millions of dollars. These companies need to step up. They have to give a percentage back and really start investing in research at institutions that will look at the health of the players. And I said I could stand up here and make a push for that. Hopefully somebody will hear it because, like I said, there's not enough research done right now for other larger institutions to really create funding for it. So it has to come from smaller side companies. These are the studies that we've published on esports so far. I just put them up there in case anybody wants to take a look at them. And I know I was on a 10-minute marker, so I'm going to ask any questions before I get the hook. So do I have any questions? No? It's one question over there.
You guys looked at, I guess, some of the food products or beverage products that are being marketed, like GFuel and some of the stuff?
She's laughing because I just said my school actually just made a contract, I believe, with GFuel. And they contacted me to say, are you okay with this? I really wasn't, but it's their job to do it. There's no science behind it. Anybody, if you actually, GFuel has an amazing website. They market it phenomenally. There's no science that GFuel makes you better, smarter, that you absorb anything better. It's a wide open market out there. So to date, I'm telling you, anything that you read out there that says this will make you smarter, faster, it's all hearsay. There's no science behind any of it.
I had a similar question along the same vein. I have seen the GFuel, all of them, just saying that they're going to make the game better, faster, longer. But recently I read an article saying that there was no real correlation between the use of gutter glasses or glasses that claim to prevent blue light, eye strain, and actual benefits from that. So is that something that you found? Because I know you said eye strain was probably one of the biggest injuries that you saw.
Does the blue light filter on these glasses? Does it prevent digital eye strain? I have not found anything that shows that. Yeah, like I said, there's very little out there. And GFuel and these other companies that are marketing to focus, they can get around saying it. I mean, they could say whatever they want. It's a free market. But B vitamins have been shown to improve memory in older people. B vitamins have been shown to improve focus sometimes in other populations. And they can take that and apply it to saying, hey, look, B vitamins do this. So we're going to put it into this drink and call it an esport drink. And we're going to show you that it gives you more focus. So there's always ways around that, and you have to be really mindful now because this is taking off quickly, esports, and everybody's kind of jumping on the bandwagon with it. So be mindful about what you read.
You may have gone over this, the fourth article down, Esports Got Muscle. How did you find the control? Like, how would you match the esport gamer versus the non-esport gamer?
We do age matched. In this particular study that we did, we took the same campus because it's a commuter campus. We took age matched controls that were non-competitive gamers. They were allowed to recreationally play computer games, but
What if they like to work out? What if they...
so we took people who were did not routinely exercise. So if they were on a sporting team, they weren't allowed to be in it. If they were a runner who ran 3-4 times a week, we didn't put them into the study. We just took we called it recreational activity. You know, so yeah.
Is there any difference in the physical problems after you stratify by skill level? Because it seems to me that esports athletes that are at the top of their game, perhaps they are more disciplined and therefore make more time for physical activities, or perhaps they're physically predisposed to decay slower in particular ways, so their body takes the strain differently. Is there any difference by skill level?
So we did not look into, that's a great question. We're actually looking at that now. What we found, what was really interesting, is that the skill level made a difference in how they actually got faster after playing for 2 or 3 hours, and they did have less pain. We're only on 3 subjects right now, so I don't even want to say the information. We're still studying, but yes, that would make a difference because it's overuse injuries, and some people might train and get, but again, it's the same repetitive motion. Some people become more adapted to it. Again, that's all research that needs to be conducted.
Has there been research on like a financial aspect, like maybe only 2% of people, of esports players sought health care for injuries because they don't have health insurance, or is it because that's something true to esports, or do they have poor nutrition because they can't afford it, or?
On a college level, what we found is that they actually just didn't realize they needed medical help. They just thought this came with the gaming. I had asked someone before, because on a professional level, we had heard a few years back, and I heard this just changed, they didn't have any health insurance. That health insurance was a big issue at a professional level. But from what I just spoke to a few players now, they are being offered health insurance. That's it? Okay, I'm getting the hook. Thank you.